Good day, everybody. Welcome to the 25th of June, 2026. We're going to talk about several things. Artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about stealing intellectual property, probably not in the way you're thinking. I know there's been some issues in the legal world with some of the large language models about using our information, our private information, but we're going to kind of see what it looks like when the shoe's on the other foot with a Chinese-made model that basically they're saying kind of stole a lot of information from one of the large language models. So we'll talk about that. Also on the fat loss front, there's a shot, and it's really being recommended, really being pushed by the powers that be out there about being a miracle drug for a lot of people. We'll talk about exactly the problems that are associated with that, at least so far. Well, this is new. And then, of course, real estate, what's happening in that particular market, and what to be aware of. Of course, we have interest rates that are higher than they've been in a while, however, not as high as they've been historically. So what's the real news? What should you be listening to? This is your daily brief. So let's get into it. What ended up happening here recently is you have an ability within a large language model called distillation. So basically, you've worked really hard, you built something. You built a large language model. You built your own ChatGPT or your own Claude with Anthropic or just like that, right? So let's say you had the wherewithal and ability to build it. So you have it, and it's your business, right? So you own and operate a thing, and the way that you built it took time. You had to get the data. You had to look around. You had to hire people to investigate the data. You had to train the model, and there's a lot of money invested into training something. It's not just a one-man show or one-person show. You have a lot of people that are very much dependent on that process, and it takes a very long time. The models that we're seeing today are so much different than the original release of ChatGPT back November of 2022 that you can see that evolution and an increase in ability. Therefore, if you're a bad actor and you say, you know what, I really don't want to spend all that money, hire all those people, try to hire the best people, because the people in the tech world that are the best of the best of the best, they cost a premium. And if you've ever met one of those people, I've met one once, and it's pretty memorable. There's a lot of big brain going on there. They might not be that fun at parties, and maybe there's some exception to that, but big brain, yeah, it's right there. So what they did is they said, you know what, I'm going to go to Connor's model, the one that I worked really hard, and in this case, Connor's going to be Claude's, Anthropic's Claude model. And we're going to go ahead and open up a whole bunch of accounts, a lot of accounts, hundreds of accounts. And we're going to start to ask it questions. And from those questions, we're going to extract the answers that it gives, and we're going to use those to train our own large language model. Pretty clever. So they go do this, and they just don't do it a little bit. Let me give you the numbers. 25,000 fake accounts. 25,000. 28.8 million conversations. This is April to June to distill, basically copy the Claude model. And it wasn't a hack. It wasn't like they backdoored it. They did just like you and I might do with Claude or ChatGPT. Ask questions, inquiries, have it do things for us, have it work on stuff. And it was amazing. So their build out wasn't the model. It was basically they didn't want to spend the money to build it out. So now they're doing this. Now it's China. And I've never been to China, but I guess you can get things that look like Louis Vuitton, if you're into that sort of thing, in China that really aren't. Copies of things, copies of Rolexes, copies of things that have particular trademarks and copyrights on them, but they're offered, I guess, for sale because I don't think they oblige by those rules, I guess. And even in downtown LA, if you're in the right part of the city, you can find those same things, and the people will tell you that I guess they're engineered in China. Not a big fan of all of that, but I guess that goes on. So this isn't a super big surprise. I don't know what kind of enforcement mechanism is on the other side of it. I don't know if there's some kind of payback they can get. But what's interesting about this is if you look at some of the new lawsuits that are coming up in court, they're talking about our information. Connor, your information about these large language models using it, and we're not getting compensated. It's training on our data. So that's something that I think has yet to play out. Now, are they going to be responsible to pay us back in this? Is there going to be some legal firm that's going to do this class action kind of maneuver to try to get these large language models to pay us back? Or even talking about it, will that get you banned from using the model? That hasn't, that end of it hasn't happened yet, but with all the changes with them having released, and this is Anthropic again, and a lot of this is drama. A lot of this is Laker playoffs or wrestling. It's all been scripted and prepared, and then it's been released, I think. But it's fun to watch. It's a hell of a game. I wouldn't take it too, end of the world-esque, but it is a very powerful technology, and we'll have to see how it actually plays out. But that's what's happening on that particular front. And then back to us. Is there going to be some payment, some compensation for the information that it gleaned from us? I do know that people that have music and books and internet systems and SaaS companies that have this software as a service, they're providing that. This stuff getting copied, not just by the large language models, but being used as information to train these models. There might come a question as to, well, shouldn't they have been compensated for this? Isn't that something that maybe they should have been offered? And saying, well, they have the entire book. The book has been used in the LLM. Did they buy the book? Did they get the rights to be able to train a large language model on the book? Because when you start asking questions about specific pieces of literature, the information that comes out of the large language model is pretty detailed. It might not, you might not be able to tell it, give me everything on page 14 of this particular novel or this book. In some cases you might be able to, but it's going to give you a lot of information about the book. Where did they get it? Did they go somewhere else? And how can that be proven? How can it be traced? This is just starting. This is right at the beginning of it. And the more data the large language models get, of course, the smarter that they are. All right, so the next thing, we're talking about these largest firms now, they're rationing AI. Right now, you get so much usage in a free account. I don't know if you've ever butted up against your limits, but if you're using ChatGPT, they have a free account. Claude has a free account, and Gemini has a free account, and so on, so that you can do some work with these large language models, do some inquiries. And when I say work, I'm looking at it kind of like I do. I go in and I'll want it to think with me, ponder a particular problem that I see out in the real world, and then I'll have it want to work with me in creating the proper steps to solve that problem. What does that whole architecture look like? So I'll go in and I'll talk to it, and I'll go back and forth with it. I'll, of course, put the problem out there to it and say, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think the best way to attack this would be? And then we go back and forth. So with that, eventually, if I'm on the free model, I'm going to run out. With that, eventually, if I'm on the $20 a month model, depending on how much usage I'm allowed, I'm going to run out. There for a while, you got double tokens. They had little bonuses if you were working after a certain hour. I think Anthropic had it between after 11 a.m. If you were working, you got double usage, or the token cost wasn't that much. All these companies are losing money. And that's a big part of the concern out there. But they believe that artificial intelligence is so fantastic that the losing money now isn't going to equate to losing money in the future, because they're having also the enterprise end. So they have that. So they have big businesses paying, a lot more than $200 a month to have their systems, their people in the systems work. Uber lately, they ran through their token usage for a year in just a couple months, I believe it was, and I'm sure they're panicked. What they have to do now is they have to see if there was a payoff in that token burn. Was it just people rendering images of cats, dancing around to different kinds of music? And maybe there's money in that kind of a channel, but we're talking about Uber, so they're probably concerned. A lot of the corporate companies are looking at that token spend, probably a little bit worried that, well, where's the return on this? Are we getting out of this? I mean, if Connor built this and we're able to monetize this, then, and we're able to make up more than he spent in the token allotment, great. But if we're not able to, what the hell's the point? So we might as well go back to scratch pads and paper and writing on napkins in a bar, with your idea. Anyway, we'll have to see how that plays out as well. They're starting to ration it though. And more than likely, this is probably, if you're in real estate, this is going to be a Glenn Ross scenario, at least with the corporate companies, where they're only going to give their best the maximum token usage. The people that aren't great at it haven't proven themselves. And you know how you prove yourself? Well, you have to practice. You have to get used to using the models. In corporate America, they're probably going to step down and say, well, we got this guy over here. He's completely brilliant. We're going to give him 50% more token use. And then we got this other cat. He's kind of a slap, but he's the owner's cousin. So we got to make him happy. So we're going to cut him down to maybe 10% of what his normal allotment might be. And who knows? It only takes one thing, one time, one moment to hit it out of the park. That's the most exciting thing about living at this time. Anybody can do some video and all of a sudden it just hits the world and everybody sees it. It's just, now they're famous and they're on Sally Jesse Raphael. No, she doesn't even have a show anymore. I don't watch a lot of TV. But anyway, then they're on the talk shows making the circuit, the whole 9 yards. So that's where we all want to be. All right, the new coworker. Oh, this is something too. So right now, other thing that people are talking about is these systems are writing the code that improves themselves. It's called agentic AI. It's actually going in and that recursive self-improvement loop. It's looking at its code, it's rewriting the code, and then it's publishing new code, it's upgrading itself. It's doing it at such a breakneck speed that human beings probably can't keep up, and more than likely, they probably really don't understand exactly what this particular system happens to be doing. Therefore, it's going to get a little crazy because at the speed in which they're able to improve, it's mind-boggling, and there's not that human enforcement mechanism in the loop. Now, maybe they built another AI to monitor this AI, and this AI is going to return back to the human being and say, yeah, you know, Claude 1 was doing this stuff, and I thought it was a little sketchy, and you might want to look into this, and maybe the human will say, oh, okay, well, tell me all about that. But I don't know if that's even happening. I don't know if that supportive safety layer has been baked into that process, or if it's just wild, wild west time and it says, hey, you be you, you go out there and we want to conquer the world with super intelligence, so you got to get there as quickly as possible. Here's all the ability you need as far as recursive self-improvement. You be you and make it happen. The issue with that is, of course, is maybe it doesn't have the particular tenets that we would desire as a human race. The protective elements, the let's not kill humans for fun elements. Let's not get rid of humans so we can replace them with data centers. Nonsense. So we have to be careful, but they're doing this, and it is a race, and they're talking about how it's writing 65% of the code. I don't know if that's accurate. I would imagine it's writing even more. I would imagine before too soon, because the people at the top are talking about it, it's probably going to be writing every piece of code all across the board, just like a lot of the programmers out there that used to hard code things into existence. Now they are using AI and they're doing what's called vibe coding, where you would sit down and say, you know, I have this problem. My emails are filled with junk and I would like to parse it and get rid of those things so I never see them again and do this unsubscribing. Most of the systems now can say, absolutely, give me access to your email, Gmail or Microsoft or whatever it is, and I'll go through and I'll set it all up for you. Well, maybe it takes some email that it thinks it's junk, but really isn't junk, so you're going to have to give it you're going to have to make sure that it works with you to go through that process. But some people don't. Some people just say, have at it, you do it, you be you, make it perfect, and the system goes through and does what it does. There's some things that could be missed in there. You got to be careful. All right, so weight loss. This is very interesting. So it's not easy to lose weight. If you look at the numbers of who succeeds dropping a considerable amount of weight, they're not good. There doesn't seem to be much of a secret. Now, a secret weapon maybe, because they've come out with these GLP-1 drugs and you inject them. Now they have pills, which is maybe better for some people. And they're writing scripts at every 5 seconds. A script is written, prescription is written for this type of medication. I believe you need a doctor. I believe you need to go through that process, but these are FDA approved. Not that that is really a great signal, but again, it's been looked at. You're not buying these under the counter. I think you can get them under the counter. Be wary with that. There are these peptide companies that sell for animals only. Yeah, at your own risk. That's probably a mess. And I don't believe they're for human consumption. But heard rumor people have used these before. But the question, I guess, is should you be using it? I mean, how much have you tried? I dropped 135 pounds of fat in about 7.5 months. No GLP-1s. I just didn't eat for a while. I got comfortable with the feeling of being hungry. I got comfortable with being that whole attitude about not eating for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then trying to eat a controlled, for a controlled day or two, and then doing the fasting again. That seemed to work out perfectly because it also reset my addiction. And that's one thing I'll talk about. As far as food addiction, it's absolutely real. 62% of what our kids eat is ultra processed. This is a new study, says a third of type 2 diabetics have an undiagnosed food addiction. So I published a site called thelastaddiction.com, and that's what it's all about. I am a complete food addict. I love the ultra processed stuff. I think beyond that, I like that feeling of full when my stomach stretch receptors are begging for me to give them mercy because I've eaten so much. And I can do that with a dozen hard-boiled eggs, a pound and a half of meat. I can do that with 15 tacos or 16 tacos from Jack in the Box and a couple large fries and a couple large Oreo cookie shakes. So that addiction thing runs across the board. But I will tell you, the food that does the most damage to me is that ultra processed stuff. And I believe if you're sitting around and you are fat, I think it comes down to you probably have a food addiction. Sorry to say it. It wasn't an easy pill to swallow for me, no pun intended, when I started going down this rabbit hole because I had a lot of questions for myself. Well, why? Why is it every time I sit down and I gorge? Why is it every time I go out, I try to buy food? And it's almost like autopilot. It's like I kind of ended up in the drive-through at places ordering a lot of food. And it almost kind of felt like I was cheating, like some kind of a gangster movement, like I'm ripping somebody off or I'm whatever that feeling comes in, like you do something and you got away with it. That's what it felt like, but I wasn't getting away with anything. I was killing myself by doing this, but it seemed to be just part of that process. I would do this all the time. And of course, trying to fight that uphill battle by all those extra calories. And you see it now. You see influencers on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok that they sit down in front of this grandiose meal and they polish it down to get views, to get likes. And I was talking with somebody the other day, and you look at bodybuilders, they go the other way, right? They take anabolics, they try to make themselves super strong. They're eating a lot of protein, probably double the intake of protein, maybe even higher. And of course, there's lots of discipline. They're working out really hard. They're lifting weights and they do it religiously. They get up to a certain size, then they start to cut. So then they shred themselves. They dry fast. I mean, they don't drink water. They just peel off as much fat as possible, which that cut will take 9 to 12 weeks in some cases, maybe more. These guys and gals will put on, the guys at least will put on, 40, 50 pounds of fat with that bulk cycle. So there's true discipline. Then when they get done with that, then they have to cut off, right? So then they start their cut, and that cut is brutal. That cut is phenomenal. And to do the cut, they try to retain as much muscle as possible. So they can't just lay in the bed and have the fat fall off. They'll lose a shitload of muscle because they have to keep that muscle active. So they might not grow much during that phase, but then you're tacking on some anabolics and wellness, stuff like that. But still, incredible amount of discipline. Now, the other influencers, this was the point, the other influencers, they're eating and getting fatter and fatter and fatter. Now, I'm curious if this is part of their thing, because to win the Mr. Olympia, it's a big deal. I don't know if winning one time is enough to set a person for life, because then there's speaking engagements and shows and talking, and you're probably invited back to, have you, be part of the crowd and shake hands and kiss babies and all that. Maybe it is a big deal. Maybe one time is enough. These fat influencers, the ones that are eating as much food as possible, number one, if they're really good, they probably get the food for free. because they film everything. So I'm guessing maybe not McDonald's, but maybe the manager there, because they do publicize, hey, I'm at this location. A lot of the ones I'm watching lately, they're in my feed. I can't get rid of them, but they're like in the Inland Empire out here, Corona, places out east, San Bernardino, Riverside. There's a lot of, I mean, my God, you watch what they eat, and the addict in me is like, I'm going to get in the car and go. I don't, but it would be phenomenal. But you watch these people, I'm wondering if they're doing it to get money and then, hit it big, and then they're going to cut down and get back to their normal weight. I don't know. I don't know if that's a ploy, just like a bodybuilder wanting to lift and get big and then get on stage and win the Olympia or Mr. Universe or whatever the different titles are. And then that's it. Then they kind of trim down. It doesn't seem to end well for a lot of those cats. A lot of the guys on the heavy end of the bodybuilding spectrum, they look a little torn up because of all the physical abuse they've caused their bodies. And then on the other end of it, you see runners are all torn up too. So a lot of physical exertion, don't know. I do know that for longevity in the world, it's good to have more muscle than less muscle. And I do know that in the male world after 30, our testosterone starts to crash. It starts to go down quite a bit per year, and it's an environmental thing, what we're eating thing. There's a lot of that stuff. So if you've never been checked in your male and you feel like you don't want to work out, you just want to lay on the couch all day long when you get home from work, you even want to spend time with your wife or your kids or whomever, then maybe you should go get your hormone levels checked. Just a little bit of advice. Back to these weight loss drugs, these GLP-1 drugs, be wary, because the people that seem to quit them, I got statistics, the people that seem to quit them actually gain the weight back. So there's that. 40% of the weight loss is lean muscle, not fat. So this is the cost one is you're gonna move less. Oh, so the way that they work, at least in my brain, and I'm not a doctor, you get your advice from everybody, but they make things not as shiny. They make doing things not as fun, not as fulfilling. Eating, scoring a lot of food in a drive-through and hiding and sitting in the parking lot and scarfing it down for an addict, that's kind of pleasurable, right? And I was a cop for a long time, so the people that used to slam heroin in a needle, the preparation part of the injection of the heroin is very fulfilling from what I understand. You get the spoon, you see the movies, you get the spoon, you get the cotton ball, you get the water, you get the little piece of tar, you get the needle, it's all set up, you get the thing that ties your arm, and you're very, it's all part of that process, so they get very excited about it. So they get it all set up, and that preparation thing is as pleasurable, from what I understand, as the actual feeling of that warm blanket orgasm that comes over after the injection, apparently. I don't know, never done it. But then on the other side of it, I used to smoke cigarettes. Getting the new pack, right? Packing it, slapping it on the wrist, packing it, then undoing the plastic. They didn't have to have the plastic so crispy. The plastic is also engineered for an addictive process. So if you smoke, you unwrap the top, and then you pull the top off. When you pull that piece of aluminum out, that piece of foil covering the cigarette, the whiff, the smell of that tobacco is phenomenal. So it's all part of that addiction. And then when you get the cigarette out, you've already packed it, but you still pack it a little bit more on your thumb, and you put it and you smell it. And then when the lighter comes up, all of that's part of the process. Same thing with a food addict going to the drive-through, sitting in the parking lot, getting everything ready, and just eating it so fast that it's burning your mouth because it just came out of the deep fryer. That's a problem. These drugs, you don't want to do that. So you find yourself not wanting to go through the drive-through. You find yourself not wanting to stop at the donut shop. You find yourself really just not interested in food. But it's not only food that you become not interested in. Apparently, you become less interested in other things. People become significantly less active after starting. Even as the weight comes off, the scale drops, the living slows down. Interesting. So that's one thing. Number two, losing muscle. Yeah, that's a big deal, because holding on to muscle is very important, especially as we get older. I'm almost 60, 57. And the more muscle you have, the better off you're going to be longer term. It's always that fall, that 70-year-old fall where maybe you've lost a lot of muscle, sarcopenia? I think that's the muscle thing. But as you go through life, You kind of quit working out. Maybe you never really worked out. And any time's a good time to start. Don't overdo it. Don't blow out your shoulders or your hips, but start to put some weight bearing exercise. And you'll be surprised, even much older than I am, how the body's going to respond, especially if you haven't done it. It's like your gift. You know, somebody that's been working out a long time, those gains come hard. But somebody that just starts, it's lovely. You're going to get a boost in everything very quickly. So it's important. But when you're taking these drugs, it says 40% of the weight loss lean muscle. So now they have different types that apparently keep the muscle, but there's other issues, other side effects that these drugs cause. Make sure you check with your doctor. If your doctor says, hey, this is the best thing since sliced bread, maybe a second opinion. I mean, maybe. All right. And the next shot, there's different ones, is hitting 30% weight loss in trials, a bigger hammer, same hidden bill. Well, that's the other thing. So now they're coming out with some that are even more strong. I'm wondering if those are going to have those same effects. I hear people that have cocaine addictions taking these that don't want to do it. Alcohol addictions that start taking these drugs and they just don't care about alcohol anymore. So all of it's good, but when you start not caring about the people you're around or your job or the things that used to make you happy, like maybe going for a walk or whatever, watching, the 90 Day Fiancé, I don't know what it is, but when you start caring about those things, maybe that human thing gets detached. So be careful. And with AI right now, as we talked about at the beginning, a lot of people are dating AI. They're in relationships with AI. There's whole systems built around that. So if you got family, make sure that, well, you be you, but be careful. Here's the house stuff. 88 new listings, 88 properties in the last 7 days have had their prices reduced. 48 properties closed this past week, and we have right now 733 single-family residences, condos, townhomes, all total 733 on the market for sale here in Santa Clarita. Every home that listed, one canceled, expired, or got withdrawn. So that's about a 50-50 rate, including the back on market properties. So these are properties that were in escrow and they've fallen out of escrow. One of the big ways to prevent this, and I was talking to a seller, I'm going to have be taking a Castaic listing here next week. With this particular listing, we had a pre-sale home inspection. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. That'll happen this next week as well. A pre-sale home inspection. That kind of cuts any change of mind out of it. Now, it's not 100% for sure. If the buyer wants to cancel, they're going to cancel. But typically, when you have that pre-sale home inspection, the home inspector is going to put together a report very similar to what the buyer's going to get. More than likely, the buyer's probably going to go hire a different home inspector. I've never seen it be the same. I suppose it could work out that way, but more than likely, once the home inspector says, well, I already worked for the seller in doing this a lot of times, just like selecting the seller's agent to represent the buyer, probably not the smartest move. That would be the same thing as hiring the home inspector to look at the property that the seller hired to do their pre-sale home inspection. So I want to get a whole different animal. So on that end of it, then you have your home inspector go out, but typically, any kind of cancellation, those cold feet, or ridiculous requests for repairs on the buyer end of it, I represent sellers only, sellersonlyagent.com. Buyers, and I did buyers for 21 years, in some cases they want a lot. In some cases, even as a seasoned agent, explaining to them, well, you want compensation of $1,000, but the only thing your home inspector found was a couple GFCI outlets that each outlet themselves is about maybe $30, and then to have an actual electrician go out just to do that, maybe $200 total. I mean, maybe even today's cost, but well, I still want $1,000. Okay, great. I'm happy to do anything you want. We just have to write it up in such a way so the seller understands why you want $1,000. Well, I just want it. Okay. So we're going to put for 2 GFCI outlets and what else? Just because I want it. Okay, so I'm going to put 2 GFCI outlets, and because the buyer believes this is proper, they're asking for $1,000. Yes. Yeah, I think it's good to have more than that. But if that's really your feeling, again, just like I love to tell people, you got to be you, got to be true to you. So the expert would say, I think for every request for repair that's asking for monetary compensation to try to get things remedied or fixed, That shouldn't be a renegotiation of sales price point because you got cold feet or you were talking to your uncle. It's always the uncle. And the uncle said, oh, well, when I bought a house, I got such a great deal. You should do the same. In fact, when I bought a house, I told the seller they're going to give me $10,000 or they're going to have to go back on the market. And they did it. Okay, great. Love the story. But sometimes you're going to run into a seller that's going to say, are you ridiculous? Forget it. I'm going to kick you out of escrow. We're going to go with the other. We're going to go back and talk to those 5 other people that also wrote offers, us accepting yours, thinking you were going to be the best because you have better financing or maybe offered more money or willing to waive some kind of contingency. But sorry, at this point, you're being ridiculous and we're not going to even entertain it. The buyer that still has an option. The buyer can say, I'm good. Thank you. I just wanted to see if you would discount $10,000. That's a problem. So these properties that are going into that, usually when you have that pre-sale home inspection, it's super strong and the people will see that. And then in seeing that, it just makes it more difficult to either try to do try to use being in escrow a little bit longer as leverage to try to get the seller to give them some kind of compensation that they really don't deserve, or other issues. But you have to be careful. But that's part of that process. So when you have that pre-sale home inspection, the only reason, then it's very apparent. Now, usually the sellers, when they have a pre-sale home inspection, they will attack the issues that the home inspector brought up within certain reason. If there's chipped paint somewhere, if there's a water stain somewhere that the underlying problem, the home inspector sees no issues, sees that it was repaired, and then calls out and says, there's a stain noted on the garage ceiling, but when doing further inspection, it looks like there's a new piece of pipe there and so on. That answers that question. Now we have a cosmetic issue of the stain in the ceiling. Again, the buyer could ask for that, but usually those cosmetic issues are really not part of that negotiation process. Health, safety, and repairs, things that the seller would want to do anyway if the seller was going to stay in the house. And a lot of times the seller had no idea. They're not trying to hide anything. They had no idea they had a pinhole leak in the wall for the last 15 years and there's moisture in there and mold. And now they have to fix that. But thank God they found it because, they're able to get it done at their term, whatever that costs. And they're able to get that negotiated, get a certificate of finishing it, and there's no issue anymore. And they get to do it at their own terms. But when you're waiting for a buyer to come in, you've taken time with the buyer. And it's not a waste, but you have that time you've taken up. So that's going to take away from your effectiveness on market. And then when a property cancels, and I do these shows all the time, when a property cancels, it's not necessarily because the buyer discovered something that was wrong with the property, but people have a difficult time getting over that. That's always the thought. They say, well, of course they didn't buy it because there was some issue they found. Even when the agent representing the seller has the seller's permission to explain why that buyer canceled and whoever party they need the permission of to relay the information, even when they tell them, this was a buyer issue. The buyer went out and bought a Ford Raptor as they were in escrow, and a $130,000 Ford truck is going to really set you back in your pre-approval. Now, if you're making, tons of money hand over fist, go buy what you want. But any of those little changes on the buyer's end of it, you need to vet with your lender before you do anything. Even if it's paying off a $50 JCPenney card, you need to go back to your lender and say, hey, I got an extra $50. This JCPenney charge card has been burning a hole and I want to pay it off. You better check with your lender. And then when the lender says, go ahead, you pay it off, you better fire off an email to the lender. Hey, Stan, it's Connor. Just wanted to make sure, this is Connor typing, just wanted to make sure that you telling me it's okay, it's not going to affect my deal to pay this $50 to JCPenney to pay off this credit card, it's going to be okay. And you have him respond an email, yes, it's okay. Or he might say, oh, maybe not. Maybe why don't you just wait until the end of this thing? So, thank God I followed up because I was about to hit the button, pay the card. And the reason being is this: maybe that was enough credit that you needed, where that card was out of a $500 limit, you owed 50. That makes your credit look pretty good, maybe even better. Now, if you have it maxed out, it takes away. If you have it paid off, you have all this open credit, it might take away too. Now you pay it off, it might take away, and you might have been right there. All of a sudden, you either can't get financed or your interest rate goes up and you did it to yourself. Problem. So make sure you get everything vetted. All right, that's where we are today. We're at the 25th. I think I already said that. Did I say that? Yeah, I think we're at the 25th. 25th today. Yep, 25th, 2026. Let me know if I can help you. sellersonlyagent.com, connorwithhonor.com. You can go there. That's fun. And then it kind of talks about all the stuff I have my hands in. I've been doing real estate since 1998, been doing AI since about 2021. I was coding as a kid, one of those nerd kids that you love, and played cop for a long time as well. That's it. I'm Connor with Honor. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow. Be well.